As we continue to cover the breaking news, among the many questions this morning following the Iran strikes revolve around the White House argument that President Trump decided to launch the attacks in part because Iran might have been looking to strike U.S. forces in the Middle East, quote, perhaps preemptively. But as Reuters reports, Trump administration officials acknowledged in closed-door briefings with congressional staff on Sunday that there was no intelligence suggesting Iran planned to attack U.S. forces first, two people familiar with the matter said. Sunday's remarks to Congress appeared to undercut one of the key arguments for the war made by senior administration officials. Joining us now, Independent Senator Angus King of Maine. He's a member of the Armed Services Committee and Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator, where do you stand on whether or not the president should have acted alone? And also in terms of working with Congress on this, where do you stand on the War Powers Resolution?
Well, certainly I'm going to vote for the War Powers Resolution because I think that's necessary. As I've followed the news over the weekend and been in touch with colleagues, it's boiled down to me to three very simple questions. Why now? Why not? And what's next? Why now? You just touched upon, and I'll echo what Jason Crow just said as a member of Armed Services and Intelligence. I have seen no intelligence that the Iranians are close to a bomb, or B, that they were planning any kind of attack. So one of the things I'm going to be looking for in these briefings is why now? What provoked this? Because the argument that there was going to be a preemptive attack or they were weeks away from a bomb, that appears to be completely untrue. The second question is why not? And what I mean by that is why not go to the American people and the Congress in order to discuss, understand, identify the risks, because the decision to take our country into war is probably the most important decision that can be made. And the people that wrote our Constitution realized that, and that's why they gave it to the Congress, the people's representatives, so there would be debate and discussion, not the decision in just one hand. In August of 1787, Roger Sherman of Connecticut in the constitutional debate said, it's not a republic if the monarch, if the chief magistrate, that's what they call the president, can single-handedly decide to go to war. And so this idea that you have to go to Congress is not because my feelings are hurt because I haven't been consulted. It's because this is an essential safeguard to how our country's supposed to work. And then the third question, which we can discuss, is what's next? Because they're not going to be able to achieve true regime change and do something for the people of Iran, which I'm totally sympathetic with from the air. I think you've had General Hertling on. No military official will tell you you can fundamentally change the form of government in a country with just airstrikes.
And so,
Lemire?
Senator,
I'm sorry, I guess there we go. Go ahead, Jonathan.
There we go. Yeah, Senator, thank you for being with us this morning. We know that we're going to hear from we're seeing in the bottom corner of our screen here, the Pentagon officials are going to be making remarks shortly with a briefing as to where things stand. We have yet to get any sort of real coherent message from the president. He's taken some reporters' phone calls. He's put up a couple of videos on Truth Social, but no Oval Office address, nothing like that. What are you hearing from your constituents, people you're talking to? Because the arguments I keep hearing the last 40 hours or so, though, of course, no one's going to miss this regime. No one's going to miss the supreme leader. But there's yet to be a case made as to why this conflict is in the interest of the American people and why American service members are being asked to, in some cases, make the ultimate sacrifice. We have 4 killed already. The president has said that number will grow.
Well, I checked last night about what the calls were that were coming into our offices over the weekend, and by and large, they were fearful. There were people that didn't understand what was going on and why, and I think that's the point you make is important. That typically, in a situation like this, there's a long lead up where the president and the national security apparatus makes an argument to the American people and to the Congress as to why something like this is necessary. As I said, there couldn't be a more important decision. And now the president did say in that press conference Saturday morning not a press conference, I'm sorry, in that speech with the hat on Saturday morning, he said, this is about regime change. We're going to change the system in Iran and liberate the people. And he talked about how they should take to the streets and that kind of thing. I was reminded this morning, I went back and looked it up, about 1956, when our officials, President Eisenhower, Secretary of State Dulles, were encouraging the Hungarians to revolt and to take to the streets. We didn't follow through, and they were crushed by Russian tanks. And the point, I think the important point, and this is based upon my work on armed services and intelligence for 10 or 12 years, you're not going to be able to change the government substantially in Iran with just airstrikes. It's going to take troops on the ground. And that's what nobody's talking about. And that's the disconnect between the president's stated goal of changing the government, putting the people in charge, and how that's going to be achieved. It's not going to be achieved by airstrikes, and that's the what next question that I think I'm going to want to hear from the administration over the next couple of days. Is there a plan? And if there is, what is it? And how are you going to do this major change in the society in Iran, which, by the way, is overdue? But how are you going to make that happen? Because the people may want to change, but the government has all the guns and a very substantial military force, police force, security forces, and they have the power. And I just hope that we haven't created a situation where we've misled the people of Iran into what could amount to a disaster for them.
And Senator, lastly, we should spend a moment talking about Israel and their role in this. And in fact, belief it is their weapons actually that killed the supreme leader over the weekend. And to your point about mixed messaging as to why we're doing this, Prime Minister Netanyahu put up a video yesterday saying that basically this is his life's work, that for 40 years he wanted this moment to occur and was working towards it. Talk to us about what you see, coming from Israel here, at this moment of conflict.
Well, there's no question Prime Minister Netanyahu has been pushing for an attack on Iran by the United States, and perhaps with Israel's support, for as long as I can remember. I mean, this is almost an obsession with him, and that's so. The question is, what was his role in persuading the president to take this action? And by the way, Gaza is a good example of how you can't win these things from the air. There was never a more intensive bombing campaign than in Gaza over the last few years, and Hamas is still standing. And so that's what is really worrying me, is what are the next steps here, and where does this go if indeed the ultimate desire is to fundamentally change the government in the country of Iran. We have taken a very perilous step here. It could work, by the way. It could work. The numbers could overwhelm the security forces. It could work, but there are huge risks, and those risks should have been discussed with the people of the United States before this precipitous action was taken.
Member of the Armed Services Committee and Select Committee on Intelligence, Independent Senator Angus King of Maine, thank you so much. And of course,